Hello, my name is David and welcome back to my channel. Today I've got a little two book haul and then I'm going to talk about future plans. So let's just dive right on in. So book haul, those that have followed along know that my library has been having a little cart with some books that are free, and so I'm making it a Saturday tradition to go out there. Last week I got quite a few. Today it was only one, but this is Don Juan from Lord Byron, which is a very lengthy poem. That's the only poem in here, but it's got notes and everything at the back, which I'm excited for. And it is 200 and some stanzas long. So I'm excited to read this. I like Byron and his poetry. I've never read this one, so this may be a Poetry Thursday coming at some point in time. And then the other day I had a little bit of time to kill, and so I stopped by a different library in town and looked at their selection and found the Norton Anthology of, or Norton Book of Science Fiction. So this one is edited by Ursula K. Le Guin and Brian Atterbury. And so this covers the very best science fiction from 1960 to 1990. So short story collections ranging from a couple pages long to 20-30 pages long per story. So I'm excited to dive in here. There's some really famous authors in here, so I'm excited to work my way through this at some point in time in the future. So with that book haul out of the way, let's talk future plans. I'm finding that I am absolutely loving reading along with people, making videos about the books that we're reading, doing various things. And over on my Discord, I've got a little upcoming read-alongs section where I've got things announced. So if you're a part of my Discord, you already have an idea of some of this. There's something new in here. But I've got planned out for the rest of the year my medieval monthly picks. I've got planned out for the rest of the year my INKLINGALONG picks. And so I'm going to cover all of those. I've got plans going into the first 6 months of 2022 for both of those, as well as one other read-along. I've got my Shakespeare September that's coming up this September that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be sharing about that. And I've got one more thing that I'm going to be starting next month and carrying through to the end of this year. And I openly welcome anybody to join along in these. I'm liking the format. If you're wanting to do them, reach out to me. I've got all my ways of contacting me down below. We can coordinate a timing, a schedule, way of keeping in touch as we're reading it. We can make the videos like Steve and Scott and myself have been doing with the Silmarillion, which has been great because then you get everybody's different perspective at various points throughout the book. And it's just been a lot of fun. So let's start with Medieval Monthly. So August, we have coming up the Song of Roland. So this is an anonymous piece of work. It's one that I think I've read, but it's been a long time. And so I'm excited to dive into this one and either visit it for the first time, which I would be surprised, or revisit it and refresh myself on exactly what this is all about. I know it's a really good one. It's relatively short, so it should be a nice, easy one to tack on in there. So after that, we have September. Would have helped if I would have organized my stack here. We are going to read Beowulf. So this is one that I'm super familiar with. I'm probably not reading the Seamus Heaney translation. I've read this translation before, but I've got like 5 other translations that are new to me. I'm probably going to pick one of those to read in September. I wanted something that I was really familiar with for September because of Shakespeare, to be honest. And so Beowulf is going to be good. If you haven't read it, it's wonderful. You'll enjoy it. If you have read it, I welcome you to grab a translation and read along with us. October, I'm going to be reading Tristan. So this is the Gottfried von Strasburg version of Tristan. This is a fairly long one, and I'm excited to read this one. Anything King Arthur always tickles my fancy in terms of getting in there and reading it. So November, I don't have a copy of the book, but I picked something that I'm really interested in and really wanted to pick up, and I tried to pick something that had kind of a sci-fi-ish slant. because of New Worlds November. And so I'm going to try to find a copy of and pick up The Travels of Sir John Mandeville. And so I think that'll be a fun one. It should be a really interesting read, and it should go right along in well with New Worlds November, because he meets some pretty mystical things in his travels. And then in December, we will be wrapping out the month with the Canterbury Tales. So this here is 15 tales in the prologue. This is not the version I'm going to be reading. I'm going to be reading the entire thing. You can read it in translation. You can read it in Middle English, however you choose to do so. But I'm excited to dive back into the Canterbury Tales. It has been far too long, and Chaucer is far too good an author to wait this long to get back into him. So that is the rest of this year for medieval. So let's talk Inklingalong. So the next 2 months are going to be two of the Inklings that I have not ever read anything by, and I intentionally made sure I spent a little bit on from my birthday stash to pick up a book by each of these authors. So in August, we're going to read War in Heaven by Charles Williams. So this is an interesting one. As you can see here, it's got the chalice, so it's got an Arthurian slant in there, and I'm excited to dive into that one. In September, one that I imagine I'm probably the only one that's going to want to read this one, but I've got it on good reputation from what I could find online that this is a good starting point for Owen Barfield. So History in English Words. So I'm excited to dive into this. I figured this would be a good one to pair with Shakespeare because it is a brief consecutive history of the peoples who have spoken the Aryan tongues, illustrated at all points by those current English words whose derivation from other languages, whose history and use, and whose changes of meanings record and unlock the larger history. If you know much about Shakespeare, you know that he liked playing with language and inventing words to suit his needs, so this is a fitting Shakespeare companion. So in October, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and not do something by any of the Inklings, but to wrap up because I'll have done Lewis, Tolkien, a Williams, and a Barfield. So I wanted to do this big chunker that I've had on my shelf for a while. So this is the Fellowship, the Literary Lives of the Inklings. So it's going to talk about all four of them. I'm excited. I've read, I think, a chapter of this years ago. And really, really enjoyed it, but never got around to going any further at the time. So I want to dive back into this. So this is October. November, I've got a reread for me coming up, but it may be a new read for you, and that is the Screwtape Letters. Again, trying to pick something that could feasibly fit in with a nice New Worlds November slant. This isn't a sci-fi pick. I just reread the sci-fi trilogy a couple months ago, so I wasn't going to make that as a pick. But if you haven't read the Screwtape Letters, it is outstanding. It is enlightening, and I think you will enjoy it. And then in December, I don't have a copy here. I've got it on my phone, and I'm hoping to pick up the annotated Hobbit by this point in time. But December, we're going to wrap up the year with The Hobbit. So whether it's a new read or a reread, I hope you will join us in reading The Hobbit. I've already got at least one person from my Discord who said they're going to join in and read that along, and that'll be just so much fun and a great way to wrap up the year. So let's talk Shakespeare September. September is coming up, and there are 4 plays that I'm planning to read, 1 per week. Make a video at the end of each week, so you're welcome to do the same or just read the plays at your own pace. You're welcome to just watch a stage production of the play, because as long as it's a stage production, they should be hitting all of the dialogue and you get to see it all acted out in the way it was intended to be performed. So we're going to do week 1, Richard II, which I did just read not that long ago, but I will be rereading it just for you guys because it is the first in this quartet. And then following that up with Henry IV Part 1, and then Henry IV Part 2, and then rounding out the month with Henry V. Those are fantastic history plays. Most people, I imagine, have not read the history plays from Shakespeare, so this is my way of getting some excitement about that. And as a bonus pairing along, there is a recent production called The Hollow Crown, where they did all 4 of these with modern productions, which is going to be a bonus watch. And then as a bonus read-along, I've also got a copy of Shakespeare's Kings, so the great plays in the history of England in the Middle Ages, 1337 to 1485. So you can see there Richard II, Henry IV, Henry V, Henry VI, Richard III. We're going to be reading plays about 3 of those 5, so why not pair this on with it and get something Shakespearean that wasn't by Shakespeare but is on my shelf that I need to read. So that gets me through Shakespeare. That gets me through the end of the year with the 2 read-alongs. Now, there's one more thing that I'm announcing that is starting next month. So if you watched my read the first paragraph by, you might have found that the Gallic War by Julius Caesar started off pretty strong. It was a very interesting, I think it was my number 3 pick overall. And so I got to looking at my new landmark Julius Caesar and started counting. There's 5 books in here. We've got 5 months left in the year after this. Why not do 1 book a month? So we're going to read the Gallic War in August, Civil War in September, Alexandrian War in October, African War in November, and the Spanish War in December. So feel free to join along on any or all of those. I know Gallic War and Civil War are probably the 2 most well-known. You don't necessarily have to have a landmark Julius Caesar, but I have it on good authority from Steve Donahue that this is the version of Caesar's works to get, and it can be obtained for under $25, which is a bargain for this giant volume. So let's talk 2022. And this is where the big announcement's coming. For the INKLINGALONG, we're going to read The Lord of the Rings. So we're going to continue that momentum from The Hobbit and roll it on into the year and read The Lord of the Rings. However, Tolkien's writing, Hobbit aside, is dense. It's slow reading. It's a slow burn, and it's best done in small, bite-sized chunks. Now, this is supposed to be 1 book. It's 1 volume. That's the way Tolkien intended it to be read and enjoyed. However, it got split into 3 books: Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. And if you've read it, you know that even further in there, there are 6 parts total, 2 in each book. So it's got kind of its divisions within the book. And so I'm using that as a natural breaking point. And so we're going to read part 1 in January, part 2 in February, part 3 in March, part 4 in April, part 5 in May, and ending The Return of the King, part 6 in June. So we will have a crawl along through The Lord of the Rings. So if it's your first time, this will be a great pace to move through and not overload your TBR with a massive undertaking to do all at once. And if it's a reread, it'll let you just really immerse yourself and be able to discuss it at length and to be able to maybe listen along to some podcasts and things like that. So for the medieval monthly, you might have remembered that I had been talking earlier this year that this month I was going to be reading Eagle's Saga, and that was my intention. And I did start it a little bit. However, I had an idea. I had a revelation as I was coming up with the Lord of the Rings crawl along and the one that I'm going to talk about next. And so I got to looking, and one of the books that is going to be in a future ideal bookshelf video is the Sagas of the Icelanders. And this is a big 700-800 page tome that contains a lot of Icelandic sagas. And I got to thinking, why not make this a crawl along with my other 2 read-alongs? You pick up the 1 book, you can read along for 6 months, just like The Lord of the Rings. You pick up the 1 book, or the 3 if you buy individual copies, and you can stretch it out over the course of 6 months. And so there will be divisions, and I'll finalize those divisions as we get closer. But the very first story in there is Eagle's Saga, so that's getting bumped now to January because I want to go through that entire thing and we'll talk about a couple of sagas, and we'll, if you have listened to the podcast Saga thing, they do a fun rating system, so we'll do that same kind of rating system where we're going to talk about the best bloodshed and the best nickname and body count and all of those fun things that are common tropes within the Viking Icelandic sagas, and it'll be a lot of fun because I was sad that I missed out on Sagalong back in April. Didn't know it was a thing, but I'll definitely be doing it next April. And why not just make it a 6-month reading of Icelandic Viking sagas and get through some of the big hitters? I think that'll be a lot of fun. And so the last thing, inspired by Poetry Thursday, we have Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen. There are 6 books in Spenser's Fairy Queen, which is the natural reason why I was like, I could do one a month. It makes it lower pressure. I mean, this is a manageable size. A couple hundred pages, 204 pages to get through the work. That's super manageable. You can add it to your reading without having to bump everything off and make it just you're reading along with David, although I would certainly love for all of you to read all of these read-alongs with me, even if I'm doing them just myself. These are the ones that I'm planning on reading and making videos to discuss so that you can enjoy all of those. So we're going to read book 1 in January, book 2 in February, book 3 in March, book 4 in April. I don't have 5 or 6, but 5 in May, 6 in June. And we'll read through the entire Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser. And I think that'll be a really fun and rewarding read-along. Now, there's this great set of volumes. Looks like it's Hackett Publishing Company, where they've got all 6 of the volumes. And it looks like book 6 also includes the Mutability Cantos, which is fantastic read as well, and I highly recommend it. And we'll see, maybe in December, we'll warm up for the Fairy Queen by reading some of Spenser's poetry together. Wouldn't that be fun? So those are my big announcements. This was a much longer video than I thought it'd be, but there's a lot that's coming up, and I'm excited about every last bit of it. I've got some great read-alongs coming up that other folks are hosting. I'm going to try to sneak into Faulkner in August. Next month, I'm going to be reading Herodotus with Book Time with Elvis and others next month as well, and I think that's going to be fun. I'm going to be reading Memoirs of a Geisha with Kate Howe and Christy Louis Dostoevsky in Space and a whole bunch of others on that one, and I'm super excited for all of those. So yeah, I'm excited. I've got some good reading coming up, and hopefully you can join me on some of these reads as well. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned, because coming very, very soon will be my part 2 of my ideal bookshelf, in which I'm going to be stepping into the ancients with a very focused look at what of those I would like to have on my shelf. So